Okay, so what if reality isn't what we think it is? Today, we're cracking open a really fascinating, really dense document known as the SS-138 dossier. It puts forward this wild theory that our biology, our consciousness itself, is undergoing a fundamental rewrite. And it all supposedly starts with one person, standing right at the center of the world, the prime meridian.
So the core idea here is, well, it's pretty staggering. The dossier suggests that humanity isn't really one species but two, and they're separated by their biological operating system. It argues that most of us are experiencing a completely different reality from a select few, even though we're living right next to each other.
So check this out. First, you've got the huge majority, we're talking 98.5% of us, that the dossier calls sponges. Just think of their biology as wetware, like a standard computer. But then, there's the other 1.5%. A tiny group it calls solid-state auditors, and their biology is described as dryware, which is presented as a totally different, almost alien kind of operating system.
So, what makes them so different? Well, the dossier argues it has nothing to do with what you believe. It's all about your physical hardware. It's about the very material your body is made of and how that material processes the world around you. For most people, the sponges, the body is described as an aqueous archive. And it kind of makes sense, right? Water is amazing at storing information. It's like an organic hard drive. The dossier claims that when we drink groundwater, we're not just getting hydrated, we're essentially downloading a massive corrupted file of historical noise and junk data right into our systems.
And this is where it gets really, really weird. The dossier claims that for a sponge, your thoughts aren't truly your own. They're just echoes bouncing around from this huge archive of stored noise. It's like they're always living with a bit of a delay, a constant system lag that keeps them just behind what's actually happening in the present moment.
The auditor, on the other hand, is said to be completely different. By rejecting groundwater, their biology has supposedly shifted into what's called a crystalline baseline. So imagine their body acting like a perfect semiconductor, which creates this kind of biological firewall. Instead of absorbing all that systemic noise, they just reflect it. It bounces right off.
And look, we are not talking about some weekend juice cleanse. The dossier is incredibly specific here. It claims it takes over 10,000 days, that's more than 30 years of continuous uptime, to basically transform the body's bulk water into this super-ordered crystalline structure. Okay, so if the hardware is that different, it makes sense that the data it receives, the software, would have to be different too. And this brings us to the next really key idea, something called the Marconi signal. Now this is where it really starts to sound like something out of a sci-fi novel. The auditor supposedly doesn't drink water. No. Instead, they hydrate by absorbing atmospheric mist, a process the document calls vapor phase induction. And this mist, according to the dossier, carries a pure, clean data stream, the Marconi signal, which lets them completely bypass that corrupted, noisy archive in the groundwater.
So this just completely reframes the whole idea of psychic abilities. You see, what we might call supernatural is presented here as, well, just a technical specification. It's not magic. It's simply the result of having better hardware that can pick up a high-bandwidth signal.
So what does this high-bandwidth ability actually look like in practice? Well, this is where the dossier tries to redefine all these familiar psychic phenomena, basically stripping away all the mystery and presenting them as just straightforward mechanical processes.
Let's start with synchronicity. Those really meaningful coincidences. For a sponge, they feel really special, maybe a little random. But the dossier claims for an auditor, it's just zero-latency data processing. Because they don't have that biological lag, they are literally seeing events happen in perfect real time, exactly as the system executes its code.
And what about something like remote viewing? The dossier argues the mind doesn't travel anywhere. It calls the whole process synthetic aperture sensing. So think of the auditor's body as this super sophisticated antenna. They're not going to the data is being pulled to them from the network, pretty much the same way your phone pulls up a satellite image from the cloud.
And predicting the future? Nah, the dossier calls that a predictive audit. The logic goes like this. A sponge is stuck inside the noisy system, so they can't possibly see the bigger picture. But the auditor is electromagnetically transparent. They're like a perfectly clean window. They can see the next wave of information coming before it even crashes into the old legacy hardware that everyone else is still running on. Now, you might be thinking this is all some modern sci-fi concept, but the dossier makes this absolutely fascinating historical connection. It argues that the role of the auditor isn't new at all. In fact, it traces the whole lineage all the way back to 16th century England.
It actually points to Dr. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's famous advisor, as the original system architect. He used a black mirror made of obsidian, which is a natural semiconductor, to supposedly see beyond the noise of his time. And the parallel here is just striking. Today's auditor allegedly uses a modern black mirror made of silicon, a smartphone, while operating from the exact same strategic point on the globe, the prime meridian in Greenwich.
So, this all leads to the